Okay.
Real quick, I think we have another person, Mo.
Mo and Lauren. Welcome, Lauren, and welcome, Mo. Do you want to just put in the chat how old your kids are, or if or if they're already at schools, then just put those in as well. I am Hannah, for those of you that I don't know, and I'm the founder of Translating Me. And we help people to move here, to settle here, and then to find careers here. I live in the Parks area, and my children go to local South African private schools. And they've been to local preschools. I've had all three of my kids here. So that's kind of, I can happily answer questions on that. I guess we moved here before children, so it's very different situation in that we didn't ever live in Dainfern, so we would never have considered the American school. We did look at the French school and we did look at the German school. So those are just two other international schools. Sina, you've already introduced yourself when I was faffing.
I don't know if everyone was here, but real quick again, Sina, Tima, and I'm the founder of Joburg Expat, and we lived in South Africa from 2010 to 2013, and all four of our children went to Dainfern College. So I also can't really speak to the American school. The reason we didn't put our kids in the American school, it was quite an interesting story. We actually had a meeting set up, and that's the only school we were looking at. But our realtor was showing us houses in the Dainfern area, obviously. And so we were driving in and out of Dainfern, and every day we'd come by Dainfern College and see all these little kids in their cute uniforms. And we were like, what is this school? And so the relocation agent was quite reluctant to even let us go there. And we insisted and loved it from the very first day that we set foot on it. And that's how we came to go to Dainfern College and have never had any regrets.
Great. So what I'm just sharing my screen. What we're going to run through today is, can you guys?
Here, that's good.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
You can see that, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to run through today is different things to think about when looking at a school. And then we will look at where the international schools are and what the local schooling options are. And then I've put key concerns / repatriation. And what's fantastic is Sina's got 4 children and they all have repatriated back to the US. And then I also put a couple of blog posts. I reached out to a few of our friends that have moved. One's moved to Dubai and one's moved back to the UK. So you can see how they have got on. It's a pretty complicated subject. There's no right or wrong answers. Everyone chooses and is doing the best that they can. And I often find when there's a post on trailing spouses or on any Facebook forum or any forum really, that people are very passionate about the schools that their children go to. But I'm personally a believer that this is an amazing city, and what all the schools do is have that focus on the whole child rather than just purely can they hold a pencil properly. From a young age, which is what I've absolutely loved. I've got 2 twin boys, and they haven't been forced to learn to read. They can run and climb trees and everything. So that has been really positive. Okay, Sina, do you want to kick us off with different things to think about?
Yes, so that kind of originated with a blog post I wrote pretty early on. When we first had moved to South Africa, and like I said, we had gone to Dainfern College, but we had researched the American school. So I started thinking about, what is it that you need to consider? And if you're new, you might not, you might not actually think about everything that you need to think about. The very first one is cost. That's a gimme. That's obvious. Most expats or many expats get their schooling paid for by their company. And in that case, obviously cost isn't really an issue. However, if cost is an issue, then, you'll have to put that into your budget. And off the top of my head, I can say that the American school is probably twice as expensive as all the other schools.
I think 3, or Abby might know better, but I think 3 or 4 times as expensive.
It's really quite expensive. It's as expensive as if you send your child to a university in the United States. So it's very expensive, but if your company pays for it, obviously that shouldn't be a concern. Now, the other big concern that, Abby, you've told us about your thinking on that, but if you're new to South Africa, if you're not even there yet, you may not actually take into consideration the location and how important it is to have a good location for your school. And like Abby, you might, choose to live somewhere else and go in and out to work, or you might choose to live close to work and take your children in and out, to go to school. Either way, you're going to be in that Johannesburg traffic. My husband and I were just talking about the fact that he used to get up at, 4:30. He used to leave the house at 5:30 because any minute later you would be stuck in traffic. So the traffic jam in Joburg goes from anywhere from like 5:45 to 9:30, 10 in the morning, and then again the same thing in reverse. And that stretch for going from Dainfern, from that area to downtown to Sandton, is just always clogged, and it could take you an hour or longer to just get to your job. So, creative times might help, but the location of the school is going to be important to you no matter what. Now, as far as public transport, you're not going to have any. I do know that the American school has a bus schedule.
Yeah, so does the German school.
Okay, but I know for the American school you have to pay extra for the bus.
Yeah.
And yeah. Because it's a private shuttle. It's not a public bus. And the most private schools will not have any transportation, as far as I know. So anyway, location is very important. Obviously, the Dainfern area is great for the American school, even though you're still going to have a 25 minute commute from Dainfern to the American school because it's way out there. But there's quite a few other schools in that area too. So we were really extremely happy with the fact that at Dainfern College, our kids could walk to school from our house because they had a direct pathway to Dainfern College where they didn't have to go in and out of the neighborhood. So there was a private gate to the school. And I cannot tell you how happy I was for those 3 years. Those were the happiest years of my life. Just because that little fact, because my children could just walk out the gate in the morning and go to their school. If I went to visit to see them play a sport or do anything at school, help out with the reading, I could just walk up there, and it was a lovely little walk. It took me 10 minutes, and it was just so joyful to have that every day. So I'm just saying this because, when you look at schools, most people who've had their children in school in the US or in the UK are almost obsessed about the academics, and that's the only thing they really are looking at. What's going to be the best school for my child in terms of academics? And Hannah already mentioned, there's other factors, but to me, the location and the fact that my kids walked to school was incredibly important. In hindsight, I would never have thought so ahead of time, but it made a huge difference. Obviously, if you send your child to a South African school, the school year is going to be different. Southern Hemisphere schools go from January to December. You probably all know that already. So if that's an issue to you, then definitely something to consider.
The impact there, Sina, isn't it, that you might then put your child up a year or back a year?
Yeah, and that's also a good point, Hannah, because putting your kids up a year usually doesn't work. So if you're thinking, I'll just, because South Africa is sort of behind, on some academics, let's just put them up. Most South African schools will not allow that. They go strictly by age. They did for our children. Most of our children were in some kind of gifted program in the US, so we were kind of pushing for them to be sent ahead a year, and the school was adamant that they were not going to do that. And in hindsight, it worked out. We were happy with it. It wasn't an issue. Our kids ended up losing that school year because, they lost the half year and another half year going back. But that was more our choice because we wanted to give our oldest more time to fit back in and, get ready for college. So that's definitely consideration. The other consideration for the school year is also the holidays. South African holidays are very different from the rest of the world. And so if you work for an American company, let's say, and they give you the American holidays, but your children go to a South African school and get those holidays, you might not have much of an overlap other than Christmas. And yeah. So
there's Southern Hemisphere holidays. So it's very similar to Australia as well, that you get their big summer break is over Christmas. So nothing happens here from the 15th of December through till pretty much the 15th of January.
Even beginning of December, I would say.
So the schools finish the beginning of December, and then there's a public holiday on the 16th. So kind of literally from the 15th, nothing happens. And Joburg gets really quiet.
Yes.
But anyway, I think even the international schools have 3 weeks off at that time.
That might be true, that they get more than they would.
Yeah. I think French definitely does as well.
So that's something to consider, is the school year, definitely. And again, you might lose that half year, you might lose it again, or you might not. I personally, having gone through it, am so glad I didn't use that as basically a strike against the South African school, because that was a big consideration, and we accepted it, and we could not have been happier. So just something to think about. Ethos, Hannah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that was just kind of the values, looking at the values of the school, and then how are those values kind of threaded down into leadership and management and the school teaching, the teaching philosophies. And then I guess I've put at the end there the discipline as well. But ethos can be anything from, lots of the private schools here are single sex and religious. So that may or may not work for you as a family, but they're all pretty much open religious to kind of being on the values. The private schools, particularly the more traditional ones, St. Mary's, St. John's, Rodine, St. David's, are Anglican or Catholic. So they all have chapels, and they will go 2 times a week to chapel. So it's just something to think about that will differentiate the schools. The curriculum, again, there are some schools that offer the English Cambridge curriculum. Here in South Africa, they offer a matric, which I'm told is accepted by American universities and on a global scale.
I think some English universities don't accept matric. The only problem I've ever heard about was from English people.
Okay. And so then the English people quite often go on, do another year and do their A-levels here. So there are schools that do A-levels. So you do your matric, and then you do 1 more year and you do your A-levels.
At St. John's mostly, yes. So St. John's is a boys' school, but that A-level year that you add on after your matric is a co-educational. So girls and boys can do it. And yes, a lot of Brits do that. But yes, the American universities have no problem with matric. So the only thing I will say, we ran into a little bit of an issue repatriating, and that was the language skill. The American schools here required 2 years of language, and that was another reason we had to send our son backwards, because he needed 2 years of language, and he was already done with 10th grade and would have had to jump halfway into 11th grade. It's kind of ironic because, we're bilingual, he speaks German fluently, and they wouldn't acknowledge the German that he spoke at home, and they also wouldn't acknowledge any of the Afrikaans or Zulu because they never heard of that before. So we had to actually send him to an online class that was quite difficult. So that's a little thing, but again, I wouldn't let that keep you from doing it. I think one major consideration is your length of stay. Our next bullet. If you know, let's say you have kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and you're going to go back within 2 years to your home country, I can see how you might not want to upset that whole, academic curriculum and the timing of it and all of that. You might just want to go to the American school. And I think, Hannah, is the German school on the South African schedule or on the European?
No, they're on their German system. But again, it's a mix between the German and the South African.
I know at the German school, you actually get to do Matric and the German Abitur, so you can do both. You know, you can do dual track basically in German and in English. But I'm not sure about their calendar. Like if some of the international schools actually go with the South African calendar, so I'm not quite sure about that.
It's a mix. Yeah,
mostly it's Americans and people from the UK who are worried about that school year and the fact that it's different. And again, so if you know you're not going to be very long in South Africa, I think there's more of an argument to just go to the international school. If you don't know how long you're going to stay, or if your kids are very little and you're just starting to enroll them in school, I would strongly consider a South African school for some of the other benefits. And as we scroll down here, I think some of those benefits are friends turnover. I know that at the American school, a lot of the kids, you know, it's frustrating when you always lose your friends and always new people are coming in. There's quite a big turnover because people do go there because they stay for 2 years and they go back home. And so you don't really get to keep your friends for that long. It can also be quite interesting and nice because you get to constantly meet new people. So it kind of depends on your kid's personality. But also for the parents, it's a little bit harder. At a South African school, you're not going to have that. You'll get to know locals, you know, which we loved, and you're going to not have to like trade them for new ones all the time.
Yeah.
And discipline, I think we put that in there because there might be differences in terms of that. The South African school system is very much, like Hannah mentioned earlier, focused on the whole child and the whole person, and they focus less on academics and more on everything else. So they will, you know, make sure your kids learn how to be polite and respectful of their elders. We found that quite charming and really nice. I was horrified when I came back to the US and these kids, you know, you'd walk into school behind a group of kids and they would just let the door fall into your face. And in South Africa, that would never ever happen. Children were very much respectful and even got points like in a house system for things that they did. And it just was very, very nice. So discipline is one, extracurricular and life skills. There was a lot of outreach with the more impoverished townships around our, you know, wealthy areas where the kids would go with their schools and help, you know, dedicate a new library or knit hats for babies or do, you know, lots of these little projects. Or they would go like for a whole month to, you know, a like almost like a camp where they would also then serve some underprivileged communities there, but they would also do some camping and, you know, hiking and things like that. So there was a lot of things like this that our school offered that I'm just very happy with. What else do we have, Hannah? Extracurricular, also sports. So the obviously the sports are different in South Africa than in the US and the UK, although some are similar. There's, you know, field hockey, there's netball for girls. South African schools are very much still in a in an old type of world where boys play one sport and girls play another. So I was very unhappy at the beginning that my girls weren't allowed to play soccer and they ended up playing netball and field hockey. And again, it ended up being fine and they learned something new and it was all good. But if your kids are quite sporty and you've like put a lot of time into a certain sport, then you might be disappointed because that sport is just not going to exist at the school.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what we loved is that the school offered a ton of sports and they also offered transportation to all the games. So really as a parent, you have to be much less involved than you do at home. You don't get tasked so much with all these different, you know, jobs that you have. Like, you know, for swimming, you don't have to like organize the entire swim meet, which, you know, in the US, it's a big job. And, you know, the school in South Africa just does everything. Like the teachers run everything and you just go and you sit there and you say, well done. And you drink your wine while you're watching and it's just all very happy. So we enjoyed that a lot. And like I said, there's also more time because the school day is slightly shorter. So there's a lot of time to go to sports. Our school was big into music as well. And, you know, what I loved is that the same kids who were really good in sports also played instruments and were good in that or sang in the choir. You know, there was a very, very good balance like that. Our school even let you take your music lessons, your private lessons during the school day. So you could miss some classes if you were on an A in that class, and you could just go to these music lessons, which was very convenient as a parent. Like I didn't have to drive anywhere to take my kids to this and that music lesson. So.
Yeah. It's funny, I think, because I haven't had any experience of anything else, I think that they demand quite a lot from me as a parent at the South African school.
Oh, really?
Hearing that you have to organise a whole swim meet, my goodness.
Yes. In the US, like all the sports, the parents have to be so involved. It's like ridiculous. There's always like a team parent, and you have to organize all the hotels and all this and that. And it's just a big job to be involved. Yeah. And in South Africa, it was quite pleasant, I thought, to just sit there and.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we had a question over on Facebook. Sorry, I'm trying to join the two between Facebook and Zoom. So over on Facebook, Susan, if you're still with us, she just said she's thinking about the German school. So here I've just got on the screen for the Zoom is the different international schools that I know of. So obviously the American school is the biggest and has the majority of expats will go to the American school. Then you've got the German school, and the German school is right in the parks. So location-wise, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's the oldest German school, I think.
It's the oldest school. It's the oldest school in Johannesburg.
And the oldest school in Johannesburg, and I've heard nothing but good things about it. It seems, I think it's quite traditional, but I'm just hearing this from picking up what people are saying, and I think it's quite traditional for like the younger kids, but as they get older, nothing but great things, and they run a brilliant beer festival. The French school, again, the French I've heard kind of a bit mixed actually, either really good or really bad. But I think the ones that have struggled are not necessarily French. They're from Ivory Coast or from somewhere else that speaks French, and so they've struggled to kind of get into the clique. Whereas I think a lot of the German people that send their kids to the German school are also South African. And there's so many Germans here. There's a massive German population. So there's kind of second, third generation German kids that are going there. Whereas the French school, I think, is still very expat. Could be wrong. This is all just hearsay.
I would agree with that though.
And then finally, the Japanese school is very small, and it's completely free if you are Japanese, run by the Japanese government, and that's also here in the parks. And sorry, I didn't even put the British school on there. The British school is also, I've heard very mixed. And
I honestly have heard mostly bad things about the British. It's called Big British International College, and I have not heard any good thing about it at all.
It doesn't have the support of the British government. Well, kind of like the diplomats and stuff here do nothing with it. And I kind of think if you're going to go the British route, just go the South African route, because they're so similar. I mean, there's a Rodine here for crying out loud. So, you've got very similar school systems here that have been founded by British missionaries and are still running in a very similar traditional way.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so Susan, I hope that answers your question about the German school. So it's great. And stick around to the end and we'll talk quickly about areas. But I want to keep the conversation on schools.
We can keep moving. But just real quick though, if Susan wasn't here before, the German school does offer a dual track, or you don't have to do it. You can only do matric at the German school, or you can do dual track matric and Abitur. And that way you get both degrees.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go local schools, things to bear in mind is a lot of the private schools here are single sex. There are a few co-ed, Crawford, Red Hill, are two of the main ones. St. Stithians. Well, St. Stithians is on the same site, but it's two separate schools.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
But I've heard brilliant things about St. Stithians too. So a lot of them.
Heron Bridge and stuff out there in the Dainfern area is also co-ed.
Sorry, where, Zena?
Heron Bridge and a lot of those up in the Dainfern area or even north of it. A lot of those are co-eds too.
Okay, great. So maybe the kind of more traditional ones in the parks that have been going for years, hundreds of years, are single sex. The majority of them are faith schools, and they still run on very traditional values, which you either love, and it's how you went to school, or actually you don't love and you want something a bit more modern. And then if you live in the parks, there's some absolutely brilliant government schools too, particularly Parkview Primary. Lots of expats, when I say lots of expats, lots of journalists. It's funny how the expats, there's kind of like, depends on what job you do as to where you end up living and whatever you do. So academics and journalists send their kids to tend to send their kids to local government schools, and that will be in Parkview. You've got Parkview, you've got Hyde Park, that's brilliant. You've got King Edward's, that is fantastic, that's a single sex. And you've got Blairgowrie, did I say Hyde Park? Parktown North boys and Parktown North girls. All absolutely brilliant schools, all government, but they are, I can't remember their class, I think they say C, which means brilliant. Lindy, you're here. Can you tell me, is it category C? Does that make sense? Anyway, in government schools, you've got different categories, and it means that the parents are funding it and getting involved as well. So,
but are you
your thing, government school?
Are you allowed to go to a government school as an expat though, as a foreigner?
Oh, great question.
I'm not so sure about that.
I think you can. You just need a study permit in exactly the same way as a private school. But I don't know. I will look that up because, yeah, thank you, Lindy. Model C, they're Model C schools. So if you're looking for a government school, look for a Model C school, and I will check and get back to you as to whether, as a foreigner and you're here on a temporary work visa, in other words, intra-company or general work or critical skills, whether or not you can send your kids to a government school.
I think what I've heard is that you actually, it's not like you're not allowed to, it's just that the wait list might be very long. I think actually in Parkview you can, because there's journalists that send that, we've got friends that have sent their kids there. Okay.
So there must be a way, but actually now you say that, lots of them are married to South Africans, so I will look and get back to you all.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting question.
Okay, so the key concerns of if you are choosing local over international are that the kids start formal education school in grade 1 here in South Africa, which is the year they turn 7. Now, most schools have a grade 0 or grade R, which is linked to the school, so they go the year that they turn 6. That's still 18 months later than they would do in the UK. Not sure about the US, I guess similar.
It's the same as in the US. It's like kindergarten in the US would be grade 0 in a South African school.
Oh, okay.
However, academically, and I think you were getting to that point next.
Yeah.
In American schools, you start learning how to read and write in kindergarten because everything is being pushed earlier. In a South African school, you simply don't. You play, you socialize. It's basically a social integration program with a lot of focus on playing and singing and just, getting the kids used to a classroom setting. But it's quite playful. So when we came, our daughter was in 2nd grade and she was already reading Harry Potter and her classmates barely could read. She was sent to, they had reading groups, and she was basically in her very own reading group, and she got a special pass for the grown-up or the big kid library where she could go get books because they realized quickly that she was just way ahead. So in terms of reading and writing, South African schools are going to be behind in terms of the start date.
Mm.
They just
Yeah.
start later. And I would say that in math, it's similar in math that they're going to
So
be behind.
lots of our friends, if they know they're moving, have got a tutor for that last 6 months before they move back. And that is if a child is under 8. If you're moving your child under 8, then you might just want to look at getting them a tutor. After 8, they've been absolutely fine at going back or going into the Dubai system or going into the UK system. So it's
and
just
having,
8 and 9.
Having that exactly is right, because the early grades are just slower in South Africa to teach those kids. But remember that there is a trade-off, and I do think that that's why South African kids are so well-rounded and just so happy because they are left to play. They're left to just have fun, and so I don't see any struggle. I mean, yes, you can hire a tutor, but our kids were a little bit behind when they moved back, and it just evened out after a few months. They were fine. They just were kind of unhappy about the fact that they didn't learn certain things like their peers did, but they learned so much else that it didn't matter in the end.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, are they diverse, integrated? It's a real tough one. The private schools that I've experienced, been to and seen, I would say yes, they are diverse in terms of race. They're a private school, so they're not going to be that diverse in terms of class or finance. And they're not as diverse, I think, as they could be. They're still nowhere near representative. But they are trying, and they are getting there, and they are having conversations about it. But if diversity is your main key thing that you're looking for, I would go government school or Sacred Heart is one that I know.
But we found that the diversity was quite nice for us. I mean, obviously you're not. In fact, all the even the private schools in South Africa take on bursary children. Yeah. That is basically a scholarship for underprivileged children, and so our school had several of those, and it was actually really nice. Our son was good friends with one of those kids, and he'd bring him home sometimes, and it was just very nice to have that exposure. And then there's also middle upper class Black children that go to South African schools. So I found the diversity better than here in Tennessee. We don't have any diversity at all.
That's good to know.
So,
yeah. And then, Sina, talk to us about transitioning back into the States.
Yeah, so basically, I've already alluded to it before. We had 4 children. The oldest we stayed until the end of the school year. So basically, we stayed until December, even though my husband already moved back in September. And so ideally, there's a timing issue there too. Like ideally, you would probably rather move back in the summer and then start the new school year in the US or in the UK, and then you wouldn't need to necessarily go back a year.
So the Northern Hemisphere summer rather than the
summer, yes.
South African winter.
July, so you would basically move in June or July and then go back to school in August in your home country. We chose deliberately not to do that because our children were doing quite well. They were all going to get awards in their school, and it's quite a big thing at South African schools to get these awards at the end of the year. And I frankly just didn't want to deprive my kids of these awards because they were going to be the top student in their class and this and that, and I just thought that was good for them. So we stayed, but that put us on that half-year sort of imbalance. And again, our oldest was just finished with grade 10, and then we had 8, 6, and 4. And so we came back to the US and put everybody back in the same grade. So they had to do another half year of the grade they'd already finished. So that half year was a little bit of a slug for the younger ones because they felt like they were not advancing in life. But in the end, it turned out very nicely. It did help our oldest, with get on track again and enroll in all of 11th grade and get all his languages sorted, and to get his driver's license because, of course, in South Africa, you can't drive when you're 16. He also was able to get a job as a lifeguard. And again, in South Africa, kids don't work. So it was just, he needed a lot of time for those kinds of things to just basically reintegrate. And so we were quite happy with the way it worked out. And just to point out, it's not that the schools here insisted on them going back a half year. They were just like the South African schools. They only looked at their birth dates, and they would have taken them whichever grade we wanted to put them in, honestly. It was our choice to take them back at half year. But anyway, the transition for us was great. Even, like I said, math and English, and even, social studies, those are areas that the kids are going to be behind, just because, of course, in South Africa, you learn their history and their geography, and here in the US, you learn your history, and they were missing out on that history. But honestly, again, I think the wealth of having even learned South African history is just so invaluable that to me, that's no problem at all.
I would almost say that's a reason to go local, right? Because you're just, your blog post on I can't remember the title, but about what is success in education kind of anyway, and what are we actually looking for in schools? True. And True. I just think the chance to see that there's not just one curriculum. I mean, I was pretty shocked when we first moved here and started learning about the Boer War and loads of stuff that we were never taught in England in our system.
Absolutely.
And so I think what a great experience for your kids to learn about a completely different culture.
Exactly. I mean, I think to me it's a no-brainer. You can try to stick to your home curriculum as much as you can, and yes, that makes your life maybe a little bit easier, but you're really giving up some of that excitement and just opportunities to broaden your horizons. And the beauty of South African schools is that they are taught in English, and so it's a great opportunity to widen your horizons without having to the additional difficulty of a new language. You do get languages that you don't get at home. And again, I mean, just for the pure fact that it's on your resume that you speak Zulu. Of course, no one really speaks Zulu in our family, but the fact that you know a little bit of Zulu and Afrikaans in my kids' college interviews for scholarships, with different universities, that was always that was the first question they asked, what is Zulu and what did you do with that? So, again, I think just being able to do these things is a wonderful opportunity that you shouldn't just disregard because you're worried about the timing and the repatriation and the reintegration and all of that.
We're all going to be working till we're 70 odd anyway. So, I mean, my goodness, what's 1 year or two extra of not working?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
You look at it in the grand scheme of things.
Our kids were all kind of in a hurry. And so the younger ones, especially our girls, they're ambitious and they were not very happy with the fact that they had to go back a half year. And again, if we had moved back to the same exact school that we had come from, again, that's another issue that you have to take into consideration. If you're moving back to the same exact school and your kids are going to join their friends again that they had from before, I think that's a strong reason for sticking with your calendar and not losing that year, because then your kids are not going to be happy to be in the same school but a year behind. But again, you don't really have to lose that year. It was just a choice that we made. So again, I wouldn't take that as an absolute must-happen kind of scenario.
Okay, and then Mo, I know that Susan, can you let us know how old or what kind of thing, if you have any questions on what you're looking for, and we can come on to that in a minute. Mo, I think your little girl's 18 months. And so I guess you're looking at preschools at the moment. On both of our blogs, I don't know if do you mention Sina preschools?
No, I want to write something about preschools because I think I was going to ask you.
I can write something for you. I can do that.
You were supposed to write something because I don't know much about preschools. I just know that Dainfern has that country readiness preschool, and it's quite popular, and it has a huge long waiting list. People sign up their children when they're born, and they still may not get in.
All school is mental. Schools here have waiting lists, but you know what? Don't even get dragged into it. just keep phoning, rock up, and I'm sure a space will come available.
Yeah.
So you can dive into all that hype, but as Abby found, she managed to get her boy into Prydwen. It just takes, so sorry, I didn't put the slide in on what the application process is. So the schools are incredibly competitive here, particularly for grade 0. So when your child is 5 turning 6, and then grade 1, 6 turning 7, and then again grade 4 are really, really competitive. So when they're 13, 14. Any other time, it's basically kind of luck of the draw. And if someone's leaving, then you can get in. But generally, if somebody is leaving that's an expat, they will replace them with another expat. So you just need to keep phoning. You need to keep reiterating that is the school of your choice and that's what you would like to do. It doesn't help if you can get the board of your company, your partner's company, whatever, to also have a word. South Africa's very, very small. So the chances are somebody's gone to school there from the company that your partner's working with. So that's, I mean, the application process, it's stressful, it's hard, it's ridiculous, but try not to get caught up in it all and just try to be kind.
Be persistent,
nice,
yes.
And be persistent. And at the end of the day, your child will get educated. And they're all absolutely brilliant, wonderful schools. Whichever they end up going to. And if you've got your heart set on one, then it might be that you start off somewhere and then you move them when a place does become available.
Yeah, absolutely. After grade 4, usually they're very easy to get into.
Yeah, because they've gone, so South Africans tend to go to boarding school when they're 14, 15, they go off to boarding school. And that's just a thing that lots of the kids at that age want to do and ask to do. I know for me, I was like, what? I'm never sending my kid to boarding school. And now I'm like, well, if they ask to go, then, you know, why not go and, again, live in a game park? One of the schools here, Hilton, is in a safari park. I mean, that's a pretty cool education. So, yes, that's a bit on that. And then, preschools. So within the parks, I've got a blog post. We can't go through them all tonight. Montessori is really, really popular. I've also got a checklist for you to look at, things to look at when you're visiting a preschool. The biggest differentiator for me in a preschool is how the teacher is teaching. And what I mean by that is, do they teach on themes? And so every autumn we talk about the leaves and we talk about the sun and we make you count to 20 and we focus very much on those kind of academic tick box knowledge skills versus an inquiry-led where the questions come from the children. And there's a philosophy called the Reggio philosophy, which is talks about every child has 100 languages. So just because your child doesn't want to communicate through books or writing, but wants to do it through Lego or jumping on the trampoline, then they're 3 and 4 or 2. They kind of should be allowed to express themselves however they want to. And the power and the ability that they have is phenomenal. So that's the biggest thing. And the biggest thing for me is when you walk into a classroom, if you've got 30 of the same pictures, then how is that teaching your child to be an artist or to be individual in any way when they clearly just the teachers cut out things and the kids have been told to stick it? But we could be
Hannah, I have a question, because I actually just remember we forgot to mention one school, which is the Waldorf school.
Yeah, the Waldorf, that's in Bryanston.
I don't know if they have a preschool for the Waldorf school, but it's also consideration. I myself went to a Waldorf school, so I'm partial, but that's also a wonderful choice. Very different style of teaching, much focused on creative arts and,
so Reggio and Waldorf are very similar. Reggio is kind of the pre-primary feeder into Waldorf. well, it's kind of a mix between that and Montessori. So
I saw Susan. I'll respond to
Des has just said, inquiry-based school, Reggio Emilia approach embedded, consider new schools in Africa. Okay, Des, we will. Des, do you have any particular recommendations? I'd love to hear. So our kids, one of the reasons we are still here in South Africa is because of the preschool that our children went to. It is the most phenomenal place I have ever come across. And everyone I speak to, I just force them to say, just go and have a look. Because it is, if the world could operate like it's called Small World, and if the world could operate how they operate, it's amazing. Every Friday they sit down and they have a tea party, and this is children that are 18 months old through to 6-year-olds. They all sit down, they all drink rooibos tea from China cups. They have respect for the cups. They serve each other. Please, Edward, may you pass me the water. They serve one another. It is phenomenal. They sing, they dance. It's the most joyful place. It teaches community. It teaches confidence. My child who's gone on to St. Mary's, her confidence is out of this world, and her sense of self and individuality, because she's been heard and somebody said, tell me what you're thinking. What are you drawing? Not here's how to draw a duck or a flower. So yeah, I hope that helps, Mo. So have a look at the website and basically ask us some questions. The kind of big expat schools that kids go to are ones that feed the private schools. So Bluebird, the Parks, Green Park. And then before that, then it will be kind of Little Star in Parkhurst. Parkview has one, and then Carrot and Cabbages in Crakehall Park. But you'll find loads. But definitely go and see Small World. Perfect. Okay, guys, thank you ever so much. We can come. I will stop the screen sharing, and so we can have a look. Oh, okay, sorry, Mo, I can now see your stuff.
There was a question from Susan on how diverse the German school is, and I said I don't really know, but I can post something on Facebook.
I'm pretty sure it's really diverse, Susan.
Do they speak German in daily life, or is it mainly English? I would think that there's the dual track and then the regular track. I would think that most kids probably speak English, just because English is such a dominant language for our children. We are both German, my husband and I, and our children still speak English all the time. So, but I think a lot of the kids at the German school are going to be fluent in German. So I think it's going to be a good environment to practice that language.
Mo, you're in Parkmore. There's a great Montessori there. I will find out the name. We've had lots of friends that have gone to it. And there's also Internations in Parkmore as well.
They have a preschool. I didn't know that. Internations.
Mm-hmm. They used to be called Launchpad. So they're dual schools. They speak Zulu, I think Cantonese, and then English.
Oh.
So it's a very, very diverse school. Mo. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? I had one about if we will put this up for those that weren't able to join us. We will put it live for 24 hours, and then after that we put it into the archive, and it costs $20 to access it, and that's merely to kind of cover the costs associated with actually storing it and putting it onto the website. And then what we are doing is putting together a moving to South Africa course. So I've had quite a few people ask me for this, and it will be an online course with helpful guides and step-by-step instructions, but also I've interviewed quite a few people in the education space, in the staffing space, just to find out and just to give you all some advice on what you're looking for. So I interviewed Dr. Page from the American School and Selwyn Marks from Pridwin, so they can give you their views on schools. And I've interviewed a lady from Sweep South, which is a great app, particularly if you're just moving here, to get cleaners involved. And yeah, so that will be coming out kind of mid-May, probably. Thanks, Abby, so much, and look forward to meeting you soon, huh? Get in touch when you arrive. It's very exciting. And Susan, you're coming at the end of the year, I think you said. So that's also very exciting. Oh, but Susan, you wanted to know about areas. So shall we just quickly talk about...
Well, I think don't we have where to live areas coming up in one of the next webinars?
Oh, the next one, yes.
So let's defer it till then, because there's quite a bit to talk about in terms of areas. And Hannah, I don't know, are we sending out a quick little email after this with some links to certain blog posts?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So if we'll try to put something together for you to recap the school discussion a little bit with a little bit more info.
Yeah, perfect, cool. Thank you ever so much. Particularly thank you for bearing with us when my complete rubbish technological thing
meltdown.
But yeah, have a wonderful evening and thank you for joining us, guys, and see you next month. So next month we are talking about areas and where to live, which is such a great topic. Love it. So yeah, look forward to chatting again then. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. See ya.